In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Christ is in our midst. He was, is, and always shall be. Today we celebrate this feast day of the Lord, one of the major feasts of the Lord, that is the presentation of Christ into the temple. We see that at the 40 days, the 40-day blessing as it is in the Gospel of Luke, the 2nd chapter, speaks about Joseph and the Virgin Mary going to the temple to present Christ. And it's a unique thing because it says that they were supposed to bring some pigeons or turtle doves. And many times in the icon of St. Joseph, you'll see that he's actually holding two little pigeons or doves in his hand. But that comes from the book of Leviticus. Now, the book of Leviticus, for anyone who's ever attempted to read the Bible from Old Testament to New Testament and says, I'm going to sit and I'm going to read the Bible all the way through, usually where people get derailed in their readings is in the book of Leviticus. And the reason for that is it's a bunch of laws, and a lot of those laws that we read about in Leviticus are not practical for us today. For example, rules and regulations and punishment if you stole someone else's animals. We're not running around taking hopefully you're not taking other people's animals in your yard, but there's a lot of laws that are in there for the people to exist in this community of the Jews. And one of those laws was when a child is born, that they were supposed to bring a lamb, and also supposed to bring 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. But we read about today, we say, well, why is it that they just brought 2 turtle doves? Why didn't he bring the lamb? But the interesting thing is that if you keep reading in Leviticus, there's a clause in there later that says, if you are poor, do not worry about bringing the lamb, just bring the 2 pigeons or 2 turtle doves. So we see that Christ came from nothing. He came from a humble background, and Joseph and his mother, the Virgin Mary, bring what they could. Not something of wealth, not like they came from great wealth into the temple, but what did they bring that was priceless into the temple? They brought Christ into the temple. And we don't hear about what happened to the pigeons or what happened to the turtle doves, even though we know that one was for the cleansing of the sins of the mother, and then the other one was for a burnt offering in the temple. Because the 40 days was a complete number where the mother was healed of whatever, from giving birth and had her strength up. The child was a little bit older and then would come to the temple. But we hear about when they bring Christ into the temple that Simeon, who was a very holy man, recognizes Christ as soon as he sees him. And he says, Lord, now let your servant depart in peace. So let's rewind a little bit on Simeon. Simeon was a holy man, and he had a vision that he would not die in his life until he held Christ in his hands. So he was told, you're not going to die until you embrace the Christ child in your hands. So what does he say when he holds Christ? We said it today in the 40-day blessing as I came in. Lord, now let your servant depart in peace. In other words, Lord, now I can die in peace because my eyes have seen your salvation. My eyes have seen Christ, which you have prepared for the presence of all people, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, the people on the outside of Israel, and the glory of the people of Israel. So he says this prayer as he embraces Christ. He says, now I can die. Now this new chapter of life for the church, this presence of Christ in the world, is the new beginning. And now that this new beginning is here, I am able to pass from this life to the next. And then there was also a prophetess, an older lady. She was probably in her 90s maybe at that time, 84 years it says, from her widowhood, and so maybe in her 90s. And she was there, and what happens? She knows that Christ is coming too. All she did all day long was pray. So she comes in and she starts saying these prophecies of what's going to happen to Christ. Starts speaking of what was said in the Old Testament, how Christ is going to change the world and what he's going to do in his mission, his life here. So we see that at that point, Joseph and Mary are just marveling at what is being said about how do they know? How is this happening? And they realize little by little by little by little, as time goes on, you see that the understanding of what is really happening with the birth of Christ, the greatness, the majesty of the kingdom of God coming to the world is slowly becoming more digestible, and they're able to process a little bit more of what's happening with Christ. But even with all these signs and understandings, even in the end, we look at the crucifixion. Where's the crucifixion? We don't have. Oh, in the back there. The crucifixion. And you see the Virgin Mary there, and many times she has her hands on her face, just looking up. That's not a posture, a gesture of understanding. When we do this, we're either surprised, we're confused, we're saddened. I mean, all those things, and the gesture of maybe even having our hands up like this, it's incomprehensible. So even at the cross of Christ, she's still learning what the message of God is. Still learning. Until they come to the tomb, the empty tomb of Christ, they're still learning. And even at the tomb, when the angel says, "Go, tell the disciples and Peter," she goes and tells the women, "Go tell the disciples." And what does it say? They thought it was a joke. They thought it was a story, an idle tale, as the gospel says. So they were learning their whole life. That is the message for us today. We are learning our whole life. You're not going to understand everything today. You're not going to understand everything tomorrow. Even at the end of our lives, we are going to continue to grow and to learn. So it's a calling for us not to give up in our learning, not to give up in our understanding, and to say, you know what, I should know more, I should be in a different place. We're all grinding that same gear, saying, you know what, I should be in a different place. But that's good. That's good to want the growth. It's good to reach out for that growth. But it's also important for us to understand where we are, and that we are always students in the church. We're always learning. We're always growing. You know, a lot of times they say, well, I graduated Sunday school. I was in Sunday school in the 50s or 60s or 40s or 20s or whatever era you come from. We never stop our catechism. We never stop learning. There's things, and that's my goal for you as parishioners, is to every week get a little something different and put it into your repository of knowledge of the church, your understanding, your faith, your love for God. But not to be upset with where you are, but to be motivated to where you're supposed to go. That's the key. Don't be frustrated and say, I'm never going to get this. I don't understand. I keep making the same mistake. I keep falling in the same errors. I keep doing the same sin. Okay. Don't get stuck there. Think about where you're going to go. And look down the road to where that is. Set your sight there, and to slowly make your way to that place. When I was in Boy Scouts, one of the classes we had was sailing and boating and all those things, and you had to learn how to swim and all this kind of stuff. But then if you passed all the swimming things, then you got to the boating and the sailing. And I remember one of the lessons that the first thing the person said was, when the weather's bad in a boat, if you're not looking way down at where you want to go, you're going to get completely taken off course. So fix your eye on something, whether it's a tree, whether it's a land, a house, whatever it is, fix your eye on that. And when you are steering a boat, you're not looking at the front of the boat. Just like when you drive a car, you're not looking at the hood of the car and the edges of the car. You're looking down the road. Your eye is opened up to look further down. And then when you get blown to the side because of the wind, you can steer, and you have never lost sight of where you're going. That's what we have to do, is never lose sight of where we're going. And never think for a moment that God is going to forget about us. Simeon, today, was told, you're not going to die until you greet Christ. And he probably, you think about it, everybody struggles with their thoughts. He probably was like, I'm getting up there. It's getting, I'm getting late in life. I can barely walk anymore. When is this really going to happen? And then what happens? In a second, Christ comes in the door and he says, that's it. Here it is. Here's what Christ promised to come to the world. Here's what God promised to me to allow me to see that, to embrace that. And when the priest comes in the 40-day blessing and holds the child, like we did today for Theodore, he's over there. He's so quiet now, too. See, it was the 40-day blessing got him calmed down, a little peaceful. But as the priest grabs the child and brings the child in, he is saying the words of 2,000 years ago, of the words of Simeon. Lord, now let your servant depart in peace. And we bring the child, if it's a male child, all the way into the altar. And we present the child back to the parents as a gift, as a sanctified gift, as a blessing that the child grows. Little Theodore is not always going to be drinking from a bottle. He's going to grow. He's going to get on solid foods. He's going to get older. He's going to get smarter. He's going to go to school. He's going to grow, develop, and become a young man in the church, like all of us, young men and women, and older men and women. But the point is, don't ever think that where you're at is where you're always going to be. Everything changes. Everything grows when we look for God. And we have to always be looking down the road and say, that's where I want to go. And sometimes for us in our lives, depending on the stage of our life, that down the road might not even be focused in this life. It might be the life to come. For people who are bedridden and on their last moments in this life, they're not thinking about, well, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to this. No, they're thinking about, God is coming to me and I need to prepare, and they're focused on it. And I've been in the room with people as they have taken their last breath, multiple people throughout the years who have died in my presence, and I've seen amazing things about that focus. From them looking past me, talking to someone, to a person who has not said anything for weeks, who has a full-out conversation with me and then dies very shortly after, to another person who is completely out with no response at all to anyone. And then I sing a hymn, and I see them do their cross and start mouthing the words moments before they die. That's focus. That's something that's in us, and we have to always keep our eye fixed on that. And those things that we keep our eye fixed on, even when we close our eyes, we'll see it. Just like if you were to stare at the sun and you close your eyes, you see the imprint of the sun. Always keep that imprint in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, in your vision, so that when you look at where you're going in life, even if it gets dark, and even if the light is prevented from coming to you, that you still know where you're going. Because don't forget, Christ says, I am the light of the world. So if we have him, we never really walk in darkness. Amen.